All right, guys, we're gonna kick this off. Let me see if I can remember how to start my video. Boom, there we go. All right, can you guys hear me okay?
Oh, good.
All good? All right, let's party. So, show day peaking, and this is a very, I want to say broad, but broad at the same time, and specific because everything is never going to be the exact same, but you guys kind of get to know my thought process of how I like to go about things for you guys. So, let's kick things off. So mock peaking, the overview, or what we like to call testing the waters, essentially. So the purpose of it is to test and understand how your body responds before show day, which is pretty simplistic in terms of why we do it. We don't want to go into this blind ever. So Kendall, for example, she's 2 weeks out now, and yesterday we did a mock load to try and see how the body responds over the next 24 and 48 hours. So essentially, yesterday was her quote unquote Thursday before the show. Today would be her Friday before the show, and then tomorrow will be show day, essentially. And we kind of get to see how the body responds to her carb up. Now, why this really matters, again, we don't want to ever go into this blindly. It removes all of the guesswork for the most part. And again, your body does change, and we have to work with that always. But it ensures we know pretty well, and I want to say exactly, but pretty well how the body will respond to food, sodium, and water. And obviously, step and overall NEAT, your daily outputs from steps, cardio, etc., as well as training. But the approach in itself is simply to run a controlled testing day or multiple days of carbing you up, monitoring visuals before each meal, after each meal. Most of you guys just do about 60 to 90 minutes after your meals. But again, fasted, pre-bed, which allows us to kind of see, okay, Kendall's had 3 meals in, or Alicia's had 4 meals in. We know that come show day, this will be the look after 48 hours after the fact, right? So all of this data, I make notes on everybody's peak week or your mock carb ups and are then able to implement most of the findings again, because the body does change throughout your actual show day, which is why it's still important that we are very much so on top of your check-ins. It's imperative to how well you do on stage. And again, we just have to make sure that quality within your check-in photos are there. I know finding light and sub in the venues can kind of be a pain in the ass, but doing your absolute best, right? But again, the mock peaking overview is just a simple fact of us gathering data, knowing how your body responds within a 24, 48, and maybe even a 72-hour window, depending on the individual in regards to food, water, sodium, training, steps, cardio, the whole 9 yards, right? And all that data just allows us to have you be as confident and cool on stage, right? So, for some, kind of already touched base on this, my little bit of a rant, but it could be just depending on how conditioned you are. But for the most part, I ideally like to do a 2 to 3 day peak for you guys. That way, we're not shoving a boatload of food to you within one day. Now, again, it does depend on the individual on how big you are, bikini versus open bodybuilding. Two very different things, right? You got a 105-pound female versus a 230-pound male, or even some of you guys are above 240. So definitely something to always take into consideration. But we really want to make sure that we monitor digestion, overall muscle fullness, aka glycogen storage within the body, and how you are actually feeling. There's one point to really take into consideration here too is when doing these mock peaks or mock carb ups, you guys have been dieting down for 10, 16, 18 weeks. You might have had a refeed here and there, but your actual size of your stomach shrinks due to not having so much volume in it. So again, we'll use Kendall as an example. I hope you don't mind. But yesterday we did her mock peak, and the fact that she's not had so much volume into her system, it probably felt a little heavy and uncomfortable, right? But coming to look this morning, the body processed and smiley face, yeah. Coming to the look this morning, the body processed the food and then still process the food over the next 24 hours. The stomach will again shrink and you won't feel like you have a brick in your stomach. But it comes to a point of us having to really push to get a little uncomfortable. You might get a little bit watery in this process. Obviously, we want to see weight come up too because that's glycogen being stored within the system. But those next 48 to 72 hours is really what truly tells us how well the peak looked or worked, I should say. If we needed more food, okay, cool. We know that we need a little bit more food for actual show day. If we need less food, you spilled over for X amount of time, we do less food. But this is exactly why we do these things, right? So again, gathering the data, making sure that we can be able to replicate this as close to possible come actual show day. And again, things may change, all depending on how your body actually responds to things. And again, I'm kind of going ahead of myself, but just because a strategy worked before does not mean it will work to the exacts again come show day in itself or the days leading up to your show. Again, if you are overly depleted, if you are working crazy hours and fatigue is just stupid high, we have to take everything into thought. We probably need more food then, and if possible, have you completely offer your feet. And everybody's different, right? But those final 48 to 72 hours, everybody, I think anybody that's on this call, I've peaked. We got Kendall, Jess, Alicia, Raf, Marta, Jevin, not yet. Najum, not yet. I think that is Helena, not yet. But for all of you guys would see how much time and effort we put into your check-ins and having you send them, after each meal, 60 to 90 minutes, or even sometimes before each meal as well. And you might do 10 to 15 check-ins a day for an extended period of time. But that's really just to make sure that come time that you put your 2 feet on that stage, that you are absolutely your best, right? So it can be annoying, don't get me wrong, but it's very much so needed, especially if I'm not there, right? And doesn't mean that you can't do well when I'm not there. That has nothing to do with nothing, but allowing us to still see how your body responds in those moments is super, super important. So again, making sure that our plan stays dynamic and allowing you the opportunity to send those check-ins in every single day, multiple times a day, and adjusting as we go. I've had people in the past that want to have a preset peak week, and fuck me, is that ever so annoying for me as a coach because your body changes day to day. And if we say, okay, Johnny, this is Sunday. You got Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Do all of this. That is me being a lazy coach because I'm not taking into account how your body's going to shift and change. So I know it can be a little bit more convenient to just have a plan set out, but going day to day and even meal by meal for certain things is the most, I don't want to say easy way, but the best way to ensure that you are where you need to be come stepping on stage for your class. And it's kind of like an adaptive peaking approach. Of course, daily assessments allow for minor adjustments to be made. Kind of already chatted about that. Uh, Small pivots in carbs, fats, rest for larger visual differences. And again, your carbs, they're very good, but a lot of you guys can burn through them quite quickly, which is why we add fats to help slow down digestion and allow that food to actually stick to the body. So, just a key point there. If you guys wonder why we add in a little bit more fats to those days, depending on the individual, right? But again, making sure that we manage digestion, sleep, having stress levels be absolutely low, if that be mental or physical stress. Alicia is a good example of this, having done so many steps throughout her day, being an active trainer and doing classes, etc. Sometimes we have to do way less to be able to get more out of a person, right? Because if we just continue to beat you up in terms of training, steps, etc., fatigue is going to set in and you're not going to look your absolute best. So if we're able to Find ways to pull back slightly to allow the body to just rejuvenate and look fresh, and you mentally feel fresh also. The two of those come to part or come into marriage with one another and just allows the body to physically flourish. I don't know what the scientific reason behind all of that is, but I think anybody that's done a show can vouch for that. If you are mentally drained, physically drained, you're not going to look good. If you're mentally fresh and physically fresh, you will look pretty sick on stage. So keep that in mind. I know a lot of people think you need to do more, 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 but sometimes less is definitely the way to go about it. But again, the goal is to have you guys all looking fresh and confident on stage. Precision over perfection is what really drives the results in my eyes, at least as a coach, and allowing us to, I'm just gonna mute Mason there, and just allowing us to be as successful as possible is not only important for me as a coach to have you guys look your part on stage, but also for you guys to just enjoy yourself. Nobody wants to go up on stage not looking the part. To me, that is not the way to go about business. Um, so again, just keep that in mind that I really do want the absolute best for each and every single one of you guys when it comes to your shows. And sodium and water, this is a bit of a funny one. Um, a lot of misconception around this. But again, some of the things that we've been doing over the last 2 to 3 seasons, I think a lot of you guys have experienced is, this is not what we do, but common mistakes is dropping sodium and water drastically before show. And how bad of an idea that really is because this oftentimes flattens somebody out. You could get cramping due to poor electrolyte imbalances and your muscle fullness on stage. You just look like a stringy, flat piece of flab up there. You can't catch a pump. You don't look full. You might be still shredded, but you don't have the actual pop to your physique, which is why having water and sodium stay in place be super important. And the second part to that is even before getting into, peak week, being super consistent with your water intake throughout the year in general, which sounds like, this massive thing, a big time frame, but it makes things so, so much easier as opposed to, you're having 2 liters throughout the whole year. And then come peak week, I'm saying, okay, we need at least 4 liters or 5 or 6 or 7, right? Whereas if you're staying consistent with those 4 liters throughout the year, you're staying consistent with your 6 liters throughout the year, depending on, what you do for work, etc. And obviously the size of you, it makes things so much easier because we're not trying to force a new system into play. Most times when that does happen, I don't want you to feel like a water buffalo, so we can't really bring that water intake up too high. Obviously, we still need it there, but we kind of have to play with what you already have, sadly. So again, if that is a case for you and you're already not hitting your water intake, do yourself the favor and just make sure that you start way in advance. Make it a point to get your water down. Um, and again, when it comes to peak week, say for example, you're doing 4 liters a day. I don't like to do this big water load situation where you have to do 12 liters or 14 liters. Nobody wants to do that shit. It's not needed. Staying pretty consistent with what you're already doing, excuse me, but maybe going up 1 to 2.5 liters. Again, depending on the size of the individual from your baseline levels. So again, if you're doing 4 liters a day, you might be doing 5 or 5.5 or 6, which is totally fine. But just to fill you out a little bit more without pushing the boundaries. And then same thing goes with your sodium, only reducing it 1 to 2 grams, maybe 3 at tops from what your normal baseline sodium intake is. Again, allows you to stay full, but allows that flushing effect of bringing that water and sodium down ever so slightly and have you look absolutely peeled come time for the stage. Now, this is not a one trick pony. If you did not do your job and get in shape, this ain't going to do much for an individual. You have to make sure that you are stage ready, right? And we'll talk about that in a couple of the later slides. But Very important thing here. If you have buddies that are being coached by other people, don't, preach to them and say that, oh, you got to do this. But it's something to look out for because a lot of coaches still have clients really drop water drastically when it's very much so not needed, nor is it healthy for your kidneys either. So just keep that in mind. But that's my approach, and it's been super easy and super successful for each and every single one of you. And even myself, I don't go up high in water. Every day I do about 7 liters. Come time for peak week, I might do 8.5 to 9. And then from there, the day before the show, we're probably at 5 liters. So again, just a bit underneath my normal baseline. And same thing goes for the sodium. We probably get to about 8 grams of sodium at the very lowest on my actual peak. So just food for thought. But the steady approach ensures muscle retention regarding intercellular fluids. You got to keep them round and full, okay? Again, we do not want you flat on stage. That is not what we want. We want you to have the actual pop to your tissue. So again, avoiding that drastic cut prevents that stringy or dehydrated look. Sodium and water have to work together. They work together. It is absolute scientific must. And removing both of them disrupts the actual pumping effect. I forget the correct scientific term of it. But on a cellular level, you need sodium and water and glycogen to all work synergistically together to allow you to actually have that fullness. Okay. That's oftentimes why you see people get on stage and they're flat. Their water's super low, their coach cut their sodium completely out, and they probably can eat as much carbs as they want. But because those other two first steps are not in play regarding the water and the sodium, it's not going to do any justice for them on stage. So again, the goal is to always arrive on stage with as much optimal muscle volume, again, depending on the class, skin tight, paper thin skin, as well as you just holding overall fullness within each shot of your actual mandatories. And again, consistency is key. Hydration should be always monitored, but never manipulated aggressively. Obviously, show day in itself, water will come down a considerable amount. You guys are still drinking roughly, I think, 125 grams to upwards of 300 grams with each meal of your actual show day meals, because you need those fluid to move the food and make sure that you don't get constipated on show day, right? So again, you do not ever, or you're not ever going to see me drop your water completely out, especially on show day. You need it because we don't need you backed up for finals. Obviously, we definitely don't need you backed up for prejudging because that's where all the work is done. So just keep that in mind. But diuretics, this is a big one. And I mostly avoid these. There may be times where we add them in. There's one time this year so far where we had to use a little bit of aldactone. And it's a pharmaceutical diuretic, but it is what's the best way to put it? Least drastic one that you could possibly use. It's about a 10-day usage one. You can even do it a few days post show just to make sure any sort of water continues to flush and fall off the system. But in regards to diazides, thiazides, etc., you'll never see me give that to anybody. There's really no need for it because they're so harsh and they work so quickly that if something goes wrong, you use a little bit too much, you are completely done for, and you just won't look the part on stage. Whereas aldactone is very useful in regards to also stress reduction on a systemic level. So that will help bring a nice fresh look. But again, because it's so light on the system, use it for 7, 10, or 14 days, depending on how many shows a person has back to back, that there's no negative side effect. The only time you might see it is you just might need a little bit more food than if you were not to use it to help continue to keep you full, especially come show day. But aside from that, that is probably the only medical grade diuretic I would ever use for anyone. And again, 10 to 14 days out to minimize reliance on last minute fixes. We want you ready. If we can nail that down for absolutely everybody, which in we've probably done 98% of you guys, that is a big thing because it takes a lot of stress off of you as an athlete, not having to try and chase a look in the last few days, because those last few days, you really should just be kicking back, relaxing, training volume comes down, which we're going to talk about, and it should just be easy, steady. Nothing in regards to stress should even be a thought. And then, of course, for naturals as well as open people, vitamin C, this is a popular one that I've been liking a lot over the last few years. And the reason why is because you can dose it very easily, because they all come in, not all, but you can get the 500 milligram tablets. There might be 1,000 milligram ones, but the chewable ones is kind of what I preference over any other one. And the reason why vitamin C is so good, it has obviously a natural flushing effect, but does not disrupt electrolyte balance. So you could use a quite good amount of it and still have great pumps in the gym. No issues at all come show day catching a pump and holding a pump. But on a psychological level, those chewables, especially when food noise is quite high, you got so many different flavors. You got, I don't know, peach, grape, fruit punch, the list goes on. So being able to just chew on three, four, five of those tablets a few times a day just helps on a mental basis. There goes Kendall. Helps on a mental basis to kind of curb those cravings. So another key reason why I like to use them as opposed to just like plain Jane vitamin C tablets, getting some sort of flavor that is outside of your norm definitely does help. Grape is top tier. I don't know about that one. Grape kind of sucks. Peach, yes, I'm with you on the peach. Anyways, let me get back out of this. How do I? Oh, shoot. You know here? Perfect. Okay, I'm still there. Alrighty, but moving forward. So that's my thoughts on diuretics. Aldosterone is great and can be used for certain individuals that are in the open stream. Aside from that, vitamin C, chewables, banging, absolutely fantastic. Now, training volume, intensity, and step management. Now, in the final 7 to 10 days before the show, sometimes a little bit sooner than that, again, depending on how many shows you have back to back, we strategically reduce overall training volume and intensity. And the reason why is you sure as hell are not gaining any sort of muscle tissue in these last few days. If anything, you're doing yourself a disservice by training crazily because you're just increasing the breakdown of muscle tissue while our main purpose is trying to get you fresh and full. Of course, we still want you to train with intent. Do not get me wrong, but there comes a point where we have to put a bit of a pause on how far we let you go in terms of intensity and in terms of your volume. So, the purpose of this is to limit systemic fatigue and inflammation, all while muscle tone and neural efficiency is upkept, right? Now, the way we always go about this is say you have 14 sets within your actual training session for that day. We will pull your training down from that 14 to 7. Essentially, you do one set per exercise, you get in, you get the fuck out. Super simple. And it might seem like a waste of time, but you mentally going into that session at one set per session or per exercise is all we really need to sustain, or I should say, maintain muscle fullness. Okay. Anything more than that is just going to obliviate you storing glycogen and you're just going to increase fatigue. So again, restrain yourself, okay? Sometimes we even just do one set with 2 to 3 reps, or maybe even 4 reps in reserve, depending on where we're at in terms of actual rep volume. But everybody is different. And again, it comes to a point of pumping the brakes and saying, okay, I have to pull back because anything more than this is just going to do me in and it's not going to be beneficial. So, same thing goes for steps. Lowering your steps, especially when we're trying to fill you out with carbohydrates, either if it be 7 days out, 10 days out, whatever the case might be, we want that food to be stored, right? If you're going above and beyond your step count, you're pushing yourself back into a deficit. We don't want to be adding more food because we want your midsection to stay nice and tight and comfortable. And if you're just, wandering, doing 3, 4, 6, 7,000 steps way over the fact because you think more is better, you're doing yourself a massive disservice because we're actually not filling you out. You have to take a step back and allow the food to just soak and saturate. That way, come show day, you have stored glycogen within your muscle tissue, and getting a pump will be a breeze. If not, you'll be fighting yourself left, right, and center to try and get something on stage. So, the reduction helps, of course, ensure muscle remains full, joints feel healthy, and recovery capacity is maximized. And also on a mental aspect of things, you just don't feel like a dead dog, right? We want you to mentally feel fresh. Obviously, there'll be days where it's hard, don't get me wrong, but we want more fresh days than hard days at the end of it all. Does that all make sense so far? I'm moving a little fast. Does anybody have any questions at all? Are we going? Okay. All right. Keep moving forward. So, exit this guy. Reversing out of shows. This is definitely the hardest part for a lot of people. And a lot of people struggle with this. But our main thing is to make this, I don't want to say easy, because food noise and appetite will be high. But the focus over the first 3 to 5 days is purely fatigue management. Again, unless you have a show the next weekend, we kind of have to say fuck it and just keep training and do our thing. But training intensity is lowered temporarily to restore energy levels, especially if we've been in prep for 20 plus weeks. Nutrition gradually returns to baseline without hidden or sudden overeating, extreme restrictions. Okay. And as everybody knows here, you guys will always have your post-show plans before you're even done finals, if not as soon as you're done finals. Now, just like how we start off with anyone that's, started their coaching with me and everybody on this call, you would give me, or I will ask you for a list of proteins, carbs, and fats, as well as any sort of additional rest days that might be swapped around within your schedule. And I will build your diet plan based off of that for your post show. And the reason for that is to give you the opportunity to add new foods in or to add or subtract foods that you just truly are bored of or hadn't had enough of, right? And in doing so, that helps most times in regards to staying on track with, your meals in itself. Again, there'll be people that have more struggles with this than not. And even myself, within my first few shows, I was fucking horrible. I probably gained 25, 30 pounds in about 3 weeks' time after my first 2 or 3 shows, just because I had poor guidance. I had poor communication with my coach on both ends from him and myself. So those two things really I don't ever want to see from you guys. I want you guys to have successful post-show phases because what happens within that first 4 to 6 weeks post-show is what sets the tone for your actual off season. If we have a crappy reverse, then we got to go ahead and tidy up and kind of fix things before we go ahead and get back into the off season. So you're kind of taking a step back to make another 3 steps forward, which is not fun. So always try and think about your reverse or your post-show phase as an extension of your prep. For those next 4 to 6 weeks, just keep the mind straight. We'll still have off-plan meals. Do not get me wrong, but making sure that you avoid trigger foods or food sources that you know do not digest super well for your body is so, so key. So just keep that in the back of your mind. I'm pretty sure everybody's done their shows for the year other than Kendall, Nicolo, and then DJ. So there's about 3 more of you guys that have to compete. You guys are all at the same show, which is pretty cool as well. But managing food noise. After a show, obviously, hunger hormones surge. They get up there. So creating constant cravings can be a thing. Doesn't mean you're actually hungry, because if I put a bowl of dog food mixed with mayonnaise in front of you, I bet you sure as fuck won't eat it. But You thinking about burgers and fries and tacos and donuts and cookies and cereal, whatever. Are you really hungry? No. Would you like to eat those things? Yes. Do you need to eat those things? No. So just really breaking down and recognizing the fact that food noise versus actual hunger are two separate things. Okay. So it's also important to reckon or kind of know that it's normal. It's a normal response from the body. It's not a failure of willpower or anything like that. It is purely a physiological response from the body coming out of a deprived state to want to eat a little more, but you physically do not need all those extra calories. So keeping structure within your day-to-day basis as you had in your actual prep, so your steps, your fluid intake, your training times, etc., they all play a massive key in just making sure that you stay on top of yourself. And of course, continuing to send in your check-ins. I don't want to ever have to remind people to send check-ins in. A, it's annoying for me as a coach, but B, you're also disservicing yourself. Do yourself the pleasure of making sure that you are staying on top of your own work as well as everything with me allows me to stay on top of things for you with ease. Okay. And mindset is key. So making sure that you win this portion of your post-show phase is what is going to be the massive propeller for a successful off season. So take this all into account, but again, keep it all in mind that the show is done, but the work in itself still continues. Okay. So, setting the tone for the off season. Again, the reverse is the foundation of how the off season pans out. Maintaining your routine, training consistency, and coach communication is at most the most important things. Avoiding large fluctuations in body weight. Obviously, body weight we want to see come up post show. It's inevitable, especially for the females. We want you to gain a little bit of fat for hormonal function. Excuse me, as opposed to you staying peeled. It's not needed one bit, okay? So keeping track of progress with check-ins. I put weekly here, but weekly as a whole, I want them every single day, at least for the first 10 days. And then we go every other day for another 7 to 10 days. And then we go back to your bi-weekly, not bi-weekly, your once a week or every 3 to 4 days for check-ins in itself. So twice a week. So again, I want to leave a few minutes here for questions, but if that all makes sense, great, cool. But if there's questions, please ask away. I'll leave the floor to you guys for now. That's the last slide. I wanted to try and get as much in as possible because it was a big one. I know I went a little bit fast, but please, if there's anything, fire away. Everybody's good?
Matt.
Yeah, fire away, Marta.
Yeah. So from show to show, the peak would definitely be different because
Yeah,
like when I've been with you now for a while, so the futures
sure.
that we done, once was different than the other.
For
And
sure.
it could, I guess, vary of how I treated I'm assuming, my off season. So if I'm more conditioned than the previous year, then things may change, right?
1,000%. If you're more conditioned, you have the ability to then take in a lot more food as opposed to somebody that's a little bit softer. We have to play the cards of, okay, do we feed Marta up when she's soft and have her look a little bit fuller or have her look a little less full, but at this point in time, she's still looking a little leaner, right? As opposed to if you're shredded out of your mind, which you were for every single show, the last season you had, there's really no big difference in how we treated your peaks
Yeah,
to the shows, right? Because you were ready. We didn't do anything crazy. We just fed you a little bit, kept you off your feet, and then you placed top three or top four in every single show, right?
correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So the important thing here is just making sure that your off season is as good as you possibly can make it to allow for a very easy prep in itself.
Okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense. So that off season is so important.
It is. Everybody thinks it's prep, but off season is where shows are won, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
It's a good question though, Marta.
Okay. Thanks, man.
Of course. To anybody else, we got a minute and 22 seconds. Everybody else is good? Okay. There's no hands up. There's no questions in the chat. All righty, people. You're most welcome, Jess. I'll let you guys do your thing. I will respond.
Thank you.
Of course, I'll respond to anybody else's messages for their check-ins, and we will continue on from there. So you guys have a good rest of your day, okay?
Yeah, you too.
Thanks,
Ezra.
Nick.
Of
Thank
course,
you.
guys.
Thanks,
Take care.
Matt.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Matt.
Of course, brother.
Thanks,
Have a good
Matt.
day,
See ya.
guys.